This set of slides discusses pension and superannuation funds. Defined benefit plan, or DB plan, is where the sponsor promises the employees or members a retirement income based on a certain defined criteria. For example, it might be based on every year employed, they received a fixed money benefit each month, or a percentage of some factor related to the employee's pay. It might be based on the final year of pay or the average of the past final 5 years of pay. The nature and behavior of this liability is uncertain and often complex, representing unique challenges. In our market today, there are defined benefit plans still in existence, primarily from public servants, but in the past 20 years or so, they have not been accessible to new members. So there may be investment managers that are still managing defined benefit plans. The superannuation that we know is a defined contribution plan can also be called an accumulation plan, and that's based on your current stage. So what the sponsor, meaning your employer, will contribute on behalf of the employee, usually a percentage of salary. In the US, some are profit sharing. And here in Australia, in 2016, our employers contribute 9.5% of our salary into a superannuation account. In that system, the participants bear the investment risk. We choose our investment strategy, we determine the contributions based on what income and salary we're earning, and the contributions and the returns belong to us as the participant. We're going to talk mostly about managing a defined benefit fund because it has its particular challenges, and you can see why they may no longer be in the market. All the risk is borne by the employer, and in addition to their operational activities, managing these defined benefit funds is certainly a burden. But we're going to talk about some of the challenges for defined benefit funds. So a defined benefit plan's investment performance should be judged relative to the adequacy of its assets for funding the pension liabilities. Adequacy is crucial to setting the investment policy. So firstly, an actuary will determine the liability size and how its present value relates to the portfolio's existing asset size. The relationship between the value of a plan's assets and the present value of its liabilities is known as the plan's funded status. In a fully funded plan, the ratio of plan assets to plan liabilities is 100% or greater. The pension surplus equals pension plan assets at market value minus the present value of the pension plan liabilities. In an underfunded plan, the ratio of plan assets to plan liabilities is less than 100%. There are three basic liability concepts. The accumulated benefit obligation, which is the present value of pension benefits if the plan was terminated immediately, and provides all beneficiaries income for years of service to date. And there's no impact of expected wage and salary growth. Projected benefit obligation is the same as the accumulated benefit obligation, except that it projects future compensation increases if the benefits are tied to average final pay, etc. The PBO is usually used for calculating the funding status. And total future liability is the most comprehensive measure. It's the present value of accumulated and projected future service benefits. Actuaries' work will also determine the split of the plan liability between retired and active lives or employees. The greater number of retired lives, the greater the cash flows, and thus a higher liquidity requirement is needed. A plan with a greater percentage of retirees generally has a shorter average life or duration of future pension liabilities. And As always, when talking about managing a pool of funds, we talk about the return and risk objectives. So the return objective is to achieve returns that adequately fund its pension liabilities on an inflation-adjusted basis. If fully funded, the need to earn the discount rate used in present value is calculated of liabilities in order to stay fully funded. The return objective may be larger than the discount rate, so as to reduce the need for future contributions. And the risk objective, when setting the risk objective, plan sponsors must consider plan status, sponsor financial status and profitability, sponsor and pension fund common risk exposures, plan features and workforce characteristics. So an overfunded pension plan can experience some level of negative returns without jeopardizing the coverage of plan liabilities by plan assets, because the plan surplus acts as a cushion. Thus, the sponsor's abilities to assume investment risk in the plan increases with funded status. An underfunded plan may increase the willingness to take risk in an attempt to make it fully funded. However, it has less ability because the shortfall already exists. The sponsor's financial strength and profitability can affect their willingness to make contributions to an underfunded plan. So you can see plan status. We need to know if the plan funded status is in surplus or deficit. And a higher pension surplus or higher funded status implies greater risk tolerance. So if it's funded, they can take on more risk. Sponsor financial status and profitability, debt to total assets, current and expected profitability, lower debt ratios and higher current and expected profitability imply greater risk tolerance. Sponsor and pension fund common risk exposures. Correlation of sponsor operating results with pension asset returns. The lower the correlation, the greater the risk tolerance, all else equal. Plan features, if there's provisions for early retirement or provisions for lump sum distributions, such options tend to reduce the duration of plan liabilities, implying lower risk tolerance, all else equal. And workforce characteristics. We need to consider the age of the workforce, the number of active lives relative to retired lives, and the younger the workforce, and the greater the proportion of active lives, the greater the duration of plan liabilities and the greater the risk tolerance. There are some constraints as well. So the liquidity requirement, the net cash outflow, which is the benefit payments minus pension contributions, are affected by the greater number of retired lives, small corporate contributions, and plan features such as the option to take early retirement. The time horizon depends on whether the plan is a going concern or a planned termination is expected. The age of the workforce and the proportion of active lives, young workforce means longer time horizon. Tax concerns, investment income and realized capital gains are usually exempt from taxation. Thus, planning can be made without regard to taxes, although they may be affected by tax changes. And legal and regulatory factors may be affected by regulation and law changes. Unique circumstances, constrained by human and financial resources available to the plan sponsor. Some investments require complex due diligence, and they may have self-imposed constraints against certain investments, i.e. ethical investing. And defined contribution funds we touch on just slightly. So a DC plan must offer a menu of investment options for participants, and we know this from our experience. When you join a fund, we can choose our investment strategy, whether it be concentrating in cash and low risk, or well diversified, or high growth, or a range in between there. If you don't choose an option, the default is a diversified option. The plan may offer educational resources. Each participant is responsible for setting their own risk and return objectives, reflecting personal circumstances, goals, and attitudes to risk. We bear the risk of investment results. And for diversification reasons, you should limit sponsor or employer company stock. Now that particularly applies in the US, where many retirement plans, 401ks, are provided by the employer. And investment managers manage defined contribution funds, the way that we've talked about managing institutional investor portfolios, in that they choose a strategic asset allocation approach. They might overlay that with a tactical asset allocation approach. They might use various models like mean variance optimization or any of the extensions or alterations to that main model to allocate, to form the optimal portfolios.